The alien princess, Lyra, had always been quiet. She was not weak, but her world was full of expectations she could not meet. In the grand palace of voices echoed through golden halls, and eyes followed every step she took. She preferred shadows, corners, and quiet spaces where no one could judge her trembling hands or racing heart. She was royalty, yet she often felt like an invisible creature in her own palace. Then the human warrior arrived, was unlike any being Lyra had ever seen. His presence filled a room without effort. His shoulders were broad, his posture strong, yet he moved with calm and patience. When he spoke, it was not with arrogance, but with confidence that demanded attention. The other leaders whispered and bowed, but Lyra's heart beat differently. She had not expected to notice a stranger, let alone feel drawn to him. Their first meeting was during a council of worlds. Lyra had been asked to stand beside him, a symbolic gesture of unity. Her palms were clammy and her legs shook as if they had a will of their own. His gaze fell on her for a brief moment, and for the first time in her life, someone's eyes seemed to see her without judgment. It was not fear or command in his expression, it was understanding. That small look made her pulse race even more. The room was alive with discussion, alien voices overlapping in a strange symphony of sound. Lyra felt tiny, like a leaf in a storm. Her mind was dizzy with titles, rules, and expectations, but beside her was steady. He adjusted his stance slightly, placing himself between her and the crowd without making a show of it. The simplicity of his act struck her. She realized that courage was not loud or flashy, it was quiet, protective, and grounded. After the meeting, Lyra found herself walking through the palace gardens where strange, glowing flowers swayed in the artificial wind. Followed silently, giving her space but remaining near. The hum of the palace seemed distant here, replaced by the soft chirping of alien birds. Lyra's voice was small when she spoke. "You are different from what I imagined humans to be," smiled gently. "Different can be good," he said. "It means we can learn from each other." His words were simple, but they felt heavy with meaning. Lyra had never considered learning from someone outside her world. Her education was filled with history, politics, and palace etiquette, but none of it prepared her for the strange sensation that gave her warmth, safety, and curiosity all at once. She had always trembled near people in power, fearing judgment or failure, yet now her trembling felt different. It was not just fear. It was anticipation, like standing on the edge of a new world, unsure whether to step forward but knowing she wanted to. As days passed, she observed him quietly, did not seek attention. He laughed softly at small things, helped others without a thought for reward, and never flaunted strength he clearly had. He treated every being, no matter how low in rank, with respect. Lyra had never seen a warrior like this. Warriors in her world were loud, proud, and quick to prove dominance. Was nothing like that. Standing beside him, she felt a strange mixture of admiration and insecurity, but also an odd, comforting trust. One night under the glowing twin moons of, Lyra spoke to him for the first time without trembling too badly. "I am not used to feeling safe near someone so strong," she admitted, tilted his head, considering her words. "Strength is not only about fighting," he said softly. "Sometimes it is knowing how to stand still and let others find courage with you." That simple sentence planted a seed in Lyra's heart. Perhaps her trembling was not weakness. Perhaps it was the first sign of her own strength awakening, ready to grow beside this human who had arrived unannounced, yet was changing everything. By the time the night ended, Lyra knew that nothing in her life would ever feel ordinary again. She would always tremble beside, yes, but now it was not only fear, it was wonder, it was hope. It was the quiet, thrilling beginning of something she could not yet name. The palace was quieter than usual that evening. Lyra wandered the halls, her fingers brushing against the cool walls, lost in thought. The memories of the council meeting and its calm presence lingered in her mind. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness every time she remembered his words. But a sudden distant rumble shattered her quiet. Her heart jumped, and she froze, unsure what to do. Alarm bells rang through the palace corridors, loud and shrill. The tremors were not natural, they were footsteps of intruders moving with deadly purpose. Lyra's knees shook violently. She had never faced danger so close. She wanted to hide, to shrink into the shadows where no one could find her, but the instinct to flee collided with something stronger, the presence of. He appeared as if he had anticipated the threat all along. His steps were steady, unhurried, yet full of precision. He scanned the hall with a sharp gaze, noting every corner, every doorway, every potential threat. Lyra's eyes widened. How could one man seem so calm in the face of chaos? She had only known fear, but now she saw a kind of bravery that did not shout. It simply existed. "Stay behind me," said quietly, extending his hand. His voice was low, commanding, but not harsh. Lyra hesitated, fear warring with trust. Her instincts screamed to run alone, to escape while she could, but the gentle strength in his tone made her step forward. She placed her trembling hand in his. The warmth of his grip spread through her, like a tiny shield around her heart. They moved through the corridors together. Shadows flickered under the strange lights of the palace, and the sounds of pursuit echoed ominously. Lyra clung to his presence, finding courage in every step he took. Each movement was careful, measured, and protective. He didn't just fight the danger, he guided her through it. She had never realized that courage could feel like a living thing, something that could be shared and passed from one person to another. Suddenly, a group of intruders emerged from a side hallway, their alien weapons glowing menacingly. Lyra froze, but's hand tightened on hers, steadying her. Without hesitation, he moved forward, blocking the path with his own body. The clash of energy blades rang in the hall, and Lyra gasped, heart racing. She had never seen combat so close. Fear would have paralyzed her before, but now, standing beside, she felt a spark of determination. He reached for her, guiding her behind a column as sparks flew. "Keep low," he instructed. Lyra obeyed, trembling but attentive. She could hear the careful rhythm of his movements, his breath controlled, his focus unwavering. In that moment, she understood bravery was not about being unafraid. It was about facing fear, step by step, with someone who believed in you. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the intruders retreated. The palace was quiet once more, but the adrenaline left Lyra's body trembling violently. Turned to her, his expression calm but caring. "Are you all right?" he asked. Lyra nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, but she felt a strange pride rising within her. She had faced danger and survived, not alone, but beside someone who had made her feel stronger just by being there. As the night deepened, they walked back to the palace gardens. Lyra's trembling had not fully stopped, but it was different now. It was no longer only fear, it was awe, gratitude, and an unfamiliar sense of strength. She realized that the human warrior had changed something inside her. The princess who once hid in corners was beginning to see a new version of herself, a version capable of standing tall, even when the world threatened to fall around her. That night, Lyra looked at the twin moons, her heart still racing. The shadows no longer seemed entirely frightening. They had been faced, walked through, and survived. And standing beside her, calm presence reminded her of a truth she was only beginning to understand. Sometimes, courage comes not from being unafraid, but from standing beside someone who believes in you. The morning sun spilled golden light across the palace gardens, painting the alien flora in warm hues. Lyra wandered among the glowing flowers, still thinking about the night's events. The intruders had retreated, but her heart still fluttered with adrenaline. She had faced danger beside, yet she could not stop trembling. Fear lingered, stubborn and alive, crawling up her spine every time she moved. Appeared quietly behind her as if he had been waiting. "You cannot run from fear forever," he said softly. Lyra flinched, unsure if she was ready to face it again. I don't know if I can be brave like you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, smiled gently, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Bravery isn't something you are born with," he explained. "It's something you learn one small step at a time." He led her to a secluded courtyard where the palace trained its soldiers. Strange devices and practice weapons lined the walls, each one alien and intimidating. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never touched a weapon before, not seriously. Her hands shook as handed her a lightweight training sword. "Start with this," he said. "I'll guide you." His presence was steady, grounding her like a rope tied to safety. At first, Lyra could barely lift the sword. Her arms wobbled, her grip slipped, and her knees nearly buckled. Did not scold. He patiently adjusted her stance, showed her the smallest movements, and repeated the lessons with gentle persistence. Each correction was a lesson not in fighting, but in belief in herself. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her trembling began to change. It became not just fear, but a mixture of concentration and anticipation. Hours passed, and sweat dripped down Lyra's brow, but she did not give up. Moved beside her, demonstrating each strike, blocking each swing, encouraging her with soft words. "Feel the movement, don't fight the fear," he advised. Lyra obeyed, letting the sword move as if it were an extension of her own trembling hands. Each successful block, each small step forward felt like a victory. Her heart raced not with panic, but with the thrill of learning something new. During a pause, Lyra leaned against the courtyard wall, breathing heavily, watched her with a quiet smile. "You've done more than most soldiers in their first week," he said. She could hardly believe it. All her life she had been told she was fragile, shy, and delicate. Yet here she was, standing upright, holding a weapon and following instructions that challenged her deepest fears. She realized for the first time that fear could be a teacher, not just an enemy. By evening, the training session ended, but Lyra could still feel the energy in her veins, escorted her back to the gardens. The twin moons were rising, their soft light reflecting in the alien blossoms. Lyra noticed that her hands, while still trembling slightly, did not feel weak. They felt alive. She looked at, and a small, shy smile appeared on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, nodded, understanding the weight of her words. That night in her private chambers, Lyra sat quietly, replaying the day's lessons. Each swing of the sword, each guided step beside, felt like a small triumph. Her fear had not vanished, but it had shifted. Standing beside him, she realized that trembling was not always a sign of weakness. It could also be a signal of growth, a heartbeat that meant she was learning to face the world in ways she had never imagined. As she drifted to sleep, Lyra understood something profound. Bravery did not mean she would stop trembling beside. It meant she would keep moving, step by step, learning from him, trusting him, and slowly becoming stronger than she had ever believed possible. The shy alien princess was beginning to see that fear could be a companion, and courage could be found in the smallest moments, especially when shared with someone who cared enough to guide her through it. The palace buzzed with excitement. It was the night of the Festival of Stars, a celebration of alliances with distant worlds. Lanterns floated in the sky, shimmering in the twin moon's light, and music echoed through the golden halls. Lyra had never liked crowded events. The noise, the eyes, the constant expectation to smile and nod, everything made her heart race. She felt small and out of place, even in her finest gown. Appeared beside her, quiet and calm, dressed in simple ceremonial armor. He did not try to impress anyone. His presence, however, immediately steadied Lyra's racing heart. Just seeing him there, unwavering and patient, made the palace lights feel less overwhelming. She realized that every step she took beside him, every shared glance, was teaching her a courage she had never known before. The crowd parted as they entered the main hall. Nobles and dignitaries from distant planets stared, whispering to each other. Lyra felt her palms grow damp and her legs tremble. She wanted to hide, to retreat to a quiet corner, but's hand brushed hers, a subtle anchor that reminded her she was not alone. His calm gaze met hers. "You are not only the princess," he said softly. "You are Lyra. Let them see you, not just the title." For the first time, she attempted to smile naturally. The music swelled, alien instruments harmonizing in strange melodies. Lyra's eyes followed the dancers, the performers, and the glowing lanterns drifting through the hall. Each time her trembling threatened to overwhelm her, she looked at. Each time his presence grounded her, turning fear into determination. She realized bravery could be quiet. It could exist simply in the act of standing tall, even if the heart raced. A ceremonial dance began, and Lyra was expected to participate. She hesitated, frozen at the edge of the floor. Nobles whispered, their eyes sharp, noticed immediately. Without a word, he offered his hand. "Shall we?" he asked, a simple question that carried trust and patience. Lyra's fingers brushed his. The touch was enough. Trembling slightly, she followed his lead, letting him guide her through the unfamiliar steps. As the dance continued, Lyra felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear was still there, a fluttering in her chest, but it mingled with awe and wonder. She had never realized that a single person's support could transform a moment of panic into one of courage. With by her side, the music became a rhythm she could follow, and the hall no longer seemed overwhelming. The crowd's attention felt less like judgment and more like a gentle acknowledgement of her growth. When the dance ended, Lyra's face was flushed, not from embarrassment but from exhilaration. The crowd murmured in approval, and for the first time she felt proud of herself. His calm smile met hers across the hall, and she realized that she had not only survived the festival, she had stood, trembled, and yet risen, all while learning to trust her own courage. Later, under the moonlight in the palace gardens, Lyra spoke softly. "I never thought I could face something like tonight," she admitted, nodded. It wasn't about facing them, he said gently. It was about facing yourself and knowing that trembling does not mean you are weak. The words settled in her heart like warm sunlight. She realized that every time she had felt fear beside him, she had also felt the first sparks of her own strength. As the twin moons reflected in her eyes, Lyra understood something profound. Standing beside, trembling and unsure, had become a symbol of her courage. It was not the absence of fear that mattered, it was the willingness to step forward despite it. And in that moment, she felt ready for whatever challenges her palace, her people, or the universe might send next. The palace halls were quieter than usual the next morning, but the stillness was deceiving. Whispers slithered through the corridors like shadows, carried by jealous nobles who Lyra's growing confidence. They spoke of her trembling, her shyness, and her reliance on the human warrior. To them, these were weaknesses, flaws to exploit. Lyra, however, had learned something they did not understand. Trembling did not always mean fear. It could mean growth. Notice the tension immediately. He walked beside her as she attended her morning audience, his presence quiet but unyielding. The nobles stared, and Lyra felt her chest tighten. Every eye seemed to weigh her, judging her every gesture. Her hands twitched at her sides, and a familiar trembling returned. But this time it was different. It was no longer only anxiety. It was the first stirrings of defiance, of the courage she had been building with guidance. A particularly sharp-tongued minister stepped forward, his voice smooth and mocking. "Princess Lyra," he said, "perhaps you would like to explain why a foreign warrior stands at your side, guiding your steps through our palace like a child." His words drew laughter from a few courtiers, and Lyra felt her knees weaken. The room seemed to close in, and she wanted nothing more than to vanish into the shadows. Shifted slightly, positioning himself subtly between her and the minister. His calm, steady gaze met hers, silently telling her she was not alone. Lyra inhaled deeply, recalling every lesson he had taught her, to face fear, to trust her instincts, to stand even when trembling. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and allowed her voice to rise above the whispers. "I am Princess Lyra of," she said softly but firmly. "And I will not be judged by my fear, nor by the presence of someone who protects what is right." The room fell silent. A few nobles gaped, surprised by her courage, while others scowled, unwilling to admit that the shy princess had found her voice. Lyra's heart raced, but she did not falter. Beside her, his expression was calm and approving, and that small reassurance fueled her determination. She realized that standing beside someone strong did not make her weak. It made her capable of standing tall herself. After the audience, Lyra walked through the palace gardens to gather their thoughts. "They do not understand," Lyra said quietly, still trembling slightly, "that being brave doesn't mean not feeling fear." Nodded. "True courage is acting despite fear, and you are learning it faster than most warriors I've known." His words warmed her chest, and she felt the first real spark of pride flicker to life. The day was not yet over. A hidden message arrived, warning of a small faction planning to sabotage the upcoming alliance negotiations. Lyra's first instinct was panic, her hands trembling uncontrollably, but's hand found hers again, steadying her. "We face this together," he said simply. "Step by step, we will handle it." Trembling but resolute, Lyra nodded. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. By evening, the palace had returned to its usual calm, but Lyra's thoughts remained sharp. She had faced whispers, mockery, and threats, all without hiding. She understood that fear would always exist, that trembling was natural, and that standing beside someone like could transform vulnerability into strength. For the first time, she felt ready for challenges both seen and unseen, knowing that bravery could live in small steps, quiet determination, and trust shared with another. As the twin moons rose above the palace towers, Lyra stood in the balcony, looking at the city she was destined to lead. The shaking in her hands was still there, but it no longer felt like weakness. With beside her, she knew she could face anything. The shy alien princess had begun to see herself not as fragile, but as someone capable of standing strong, even in the shadows of jealousy and hidden threats. The palace bells tolled at dawn, signaling the beginning of the trial of fire. This was a sacred test for any heir, meant to prove courage, wisdom, and leadership. Lyra's stomach twisted in knots as she gazed at the hall ahead. Flames danced along the edges of a long corridor, their heat flickering in strange patterns across the walls. She had trained with, learned to steady her hands, but nothing could prepare her for this. Her legs trembled violently, and for a moment she wanted to turn and run. The nobles, dignitaries, and advisors waited silently, their eyes sharp, assessing her every move. The weight of expectation pressed down on her chest, and Lyra felt small, fragile, unsure. She glanced at who stood beside her, calm and unwavering. His presence was like an anchor in a storm. "You can do this," said quietly. "Step by step, I am with you." His hand brushed hers, a simple gesture, but it filled her with courage. Trembling, she placed one foot forward. The heat from the flames kissed her skin, but she held her breath, remembering every lesson had taught her. Bravery is not the absence of fear, it is acting in spite of it. The first steps were the hardest. Her legs shook and her grip on the ceremonial staff faltered, but matched her pace, guiding her silently, protecting her path without overshadowing her. Lyra realized that courage could exist even in trembling hands, even when fear clawed at the heart. Each step forward was a victory, and though the flames roared, she felt a strange sense of power growing inside her. Midway through the corridor, a sudden gust of wind fanned the flames, intensifying their heat. Lyra froze, her pulse racing. Doubt whispered, telling her she would fail, that she was not strong enough. His hand gripped hers firmly. "Do not look at the fire," he said softly. "Look at me, trust yourself, trust us." His words were steady, calm, unyielding. Trembling, she followed them, focusing on his eyes rather than the inferno surrounding her. Step by step, they moved together. Lyra's heart pounded, but the fear no longer ruled her. The trembling remained, but it had changed. It was no longer panic. It was awareness, energy, and determination. She felt the rhythm of her own courage, beating in sync with calm presence. By the time they reached the end of the corridor, she realized she had walked through fire, not only the flames, but her own fear. The crowd erupted in applause, astonished at her performance. Lyra's face was flushed, her body exhausted, yet her eyes sparkled with a newfound strength. Stepped beside her, giving a small nod of approval. "See," he said quietly. "Fear does not make you weak. It is proof that you are alive and capable of courage." Lyra could only nod, overwhelmed with relief and pride. She had faced the trial of fire and had not only survived, it had transformed her trembling into strength. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Lyra sat under the twin moons, reflecting on the day. The heat, the pressure, the expectations, they had all threatened to break her. But she had endured. She had learned that trembling did not mean defeat. It meant she was growing, learning, and discovering the power that lived within her. Stood beside her, silent, his presence comforting. Lyra rested her hand on his, feeling gratitude and something deeper she could not yet name. For the first time, she truly understood the lessons he had been teaching her all along. That bravery could be quiet, that courage could exist in trembling hands, and that the shy alien princess could rise, step by step, with trust and strength guiding her forward. As the twin moons reflected in the water of the garden fountain, Lyra felt a profound truth settle in her heart. She would never stop trembling beside. But now she knew trembling could be the beginning of extraordinary courage, the spark of strength she had always feared she lacked. The palace was quiet that evening, bathed in the soft glow of twin moons. Lyra stood on the balcony, looking out over the city that stretched beneath her. The streets were alive with lights, the people moving like tiny stars in the darkness. She felt the weight of her role pressing on her shoulders, yet something inside her had shifted. No longer was she the trembling, shy princess who had once hidden in corners. Appeared beside her, silent but steady, as he always had been. Lyra's heart skipped at the sight of him, but the trembling that once overwhelmed her was now different. It was a quiet vibration, a reminder that she had survived fear, grown through it, and learned to walk beside it. "The city looks peaceful tonight," said softly. Lyra nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "Peaceful for now," she murmured. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen threats, challenges, and whispers of betrayal, yet had not let them break her. She remembered the intruders, the whispers of nobles, the trial of fire, and every step she had taken beside. Trembling had been her companion through it all, but now it had become proof of her strength rather than a mark of weakness. Reached for her hand, she felt warmth spread through her chest, steadying her thoughts. "You've changed," he said simply. "Not because of me, but because you learned to trust yourself." Lyra squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of gratitude. All her life, she had feared judgment, failure, and the expectations of others, but had shown her that courage could grow in the smallest moments through patience, guidance, and unwavering trust. She turned to him, eyes shining in the moonlight. I always trembled when I stood beside you, she admitted softly. But now I see it is not weakness, it is learning, growth, strength. Smiled, the kind of smile that held pride without arrogance, warmth without condescension. Then you understand, he said. Trembling is proof you are alive, capable, and ready for what comes next. The wind rustled through the balcony, carrying the scents of alien flowers and distant fires from the city. Lyra's chest swelled with a mix of emotions, relief, pride, gratitude, and something deeper, unspoken. For the first time, she felt truly whole. She had faced fear, danger, mockery, and her own doubts, and she had survived each trial. She had learned to stand tall even when trembling, and she had learned that true strength often begins quietly, beside someone who believes in you. Leaned slightly closer, and Lyra realized she was no longer intimidated by the man who had once seemed impossibly strong. Instead, she felt inspired. His strength had taught her courage, but her courage was now her own. She did not need to hide in the shadows. She could walk forward step by step, trembling if she must, but moving forward nonetheless. As the moons reflected in the palace fountains, Lyra turned fully to. "Whatever challenges come," she said, her voice steady, "we face them together." Nodded, his hand tightening around hers in silent agreement. Together they were more than a princess and a warrior. They were a team, a pair whose trust and courage amplified each other, whose presence made trembling a sign of readiness, not fear. The night stretched on, calm and serene. Lyra felt a sense of completion she had never known. She was no longer only the shy alien princess trembling beside a human warrior. She was a leader, a protector, a young woman who had discovered the extraordinary power that lay within her, and she had discovered it through trust, patience, and the quiet guidance of someone who believed in her. Finally, as the twin moons shone brighter than ever, Lyra whispered to herself, almost in awe, "I am ready." And for the first time, her trembling was not fear. It was the heartbeat of courage, the pulse of a princess who had grown into her own strength, standing tall, side by side with the human warrior who had changed her life forever.